Now we're off to Suzuka for live coverage of the final qualifying laps of this year's Formula One World Championship. Your host in Japan, Jim Rosenthal.
It's the last racing weekend of another season that's belonged to Michael Schumacher. He's capable of everything except manufacturing a dead heat.
Out of the final corner then for the final time here in Indianapolis. Michael Schumacher leading Rubens Barrichello. Another Ferrari 1-2, but Schumacher slows. Barrichello is alongside him as they run for the line. A Ferrari wins the race, but which one?
After Barrichello's controversial win stateside, Ferrari hunt their 15th victory of the year in Japan. The red procession, though, has prompted Formula One to take a very close look at itself. Sweeping changes are on the table as we approach the final hurdle of F1 2002, the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Hello there. Good morning to you from our London studio. Very well done indeed for joining us. You really are the hardcore F1 fans. I'm proud of you. Well, Bernie Ecclestone really started the ball rolling when he told us before the United States Grand Prix that Formula One must sharpen up its act. Since then, the desire for change has intensified.
As you can imagine, there's been a lot of discussion here in Suzuka about this document, which FIA boss Max Mosley has circulated amongst the teams. It contains 9 proposed changes. Some are aimed at improving the spectacle, others are designed to reduce costs. How about this, for example, drivers moving from car to car until they've raced for every team on the grid. After that, the man leading the championship gets to pick which car he wants for the rest of the season. 4 mandatory qualifying sessions, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, with the grid order determined by the aggregate times. More choice of tyres on offer, although each team will still be restricted to 2 compounds per weekend. A kilogram of ballast to be added to the car for every point scored. Only 12 days testing per team during the season and none at Grand Prix circuits. The new rule restricting teams to the use of only 1 engine per weekend to start from next year, not 2004. Gearboxes and other key components must last for a specified number of races. Only 1 design change to the car's bodywork during the season. Setup changes will still be permitted. Standardised brakes and electronics and ballast to stay fixed in one place all season. Max Mosley, the architect of the proposal, is here in Suzuka. Max, some of these suggestions are a bit far-fetched, aren't they? I mean, drivers switching from car to car, can you really see that happening?
Well, I think it'd be very nice if it does happen, because it would be so fascinating to see certain drivers in certain cars. And of course, above all, we'd get rid of that idea that he only won the championship because he had the best car or had he been in a better car, he would have won, and so on. So I think it would be a much better system, but it will be difficult to persuade the teams and everyone else to accept it. That's certainly true.
I was going to ask you about that. You're meeting with the team owners later this month. Do you have to have unanimous agreement, or is there some mechanism whereby you can force change through?
Well, you can never force it through, but we don't have to have unanimous agreement. It's a 26-man body, and we have to get 18 votes in favour. It's a rather strange sort of archaic system we have, but if we can get 18 people to agree, we can get something like that in. If we did get it in, then all the contractual problems would have to be looked at. So it's a fairly big hill to climb, but maybe we'll get there.
Why do you feel these changes are necessary?
Well, there's a definite trend for people losing interest and not watching because Ferrari are winning by so much. Now, it's not Ferrari's fault, it's the fault of the other teams. But the fact is that if you know who's going to win, it is tempting to do something else on a Sunday afternoon rather than watch the Grand Prix. Now, if people do that all over the world, that's not good for Formula One. So we want to try and find a way without interfering with the competition, still letting the best driver and the best team win, find a way to make it more interesting.
What's the timescale? Do you expect to see any of these proposals in place for the start of next season?
We may do, because we may see, if we did get the driver proposal through, we would certainly see it next season. And of course, if we got the other controversial one through with the kilo a point, again, that could come in next season. But it's difficult to say how far we'll get with this.
Well, thanks, Max. Well, that's the view from the top. Let's see what people down in the paddock have made of the suggestions.
Well, I like the idea of swapping the drivers around. I know that sort of everyone dismisses it immediately, but can you imagine that you select 20 drivers at the beginning of the season? These are your 20 Formula One drivers, and they're going to move around from team to team each race. So Michael Schumacher one day in a Minardi, Alex Young, if he's chosen as one of the top 20 drivers in the world, in a Ferrari. The change, every race different, every sort of event a different contest. I think things like that, all right, those are the radical ones, and maybe that's not for the short term, but nonetheless, you know, don't dismiss it.
I think we all know that that's pulled from a sort of Viz magazine special, isn't it? You know, that's not really a serious, you know, you've got to have a serious proposal that you can offer me to give an opinion on.
The real problem is the performance of ourselves and Williams. Now, we're just not doing a good enough job. We've fallen well short of our potential, and the best way to make Formula One a spectacle in the future is to leave the regulations alone and let Williams and McLaren get their act together, and that's what we're doing.
Something must be done, and I think it needs to be done by somebody outside team principals. Because the team principals, they're never going to agree. It's a simple fact. To get 10 of us to sit down and agree on anything is quite honestly impossible.
So while the key players in the sport accept the need to change, one development this weekend might see one team go out of business. 4 of the English outfits want to take Minardi here to arbitration over their claimed share of the Prost points money. It's something the little cash-strapped team can ill afford.
Basically, it will finish off Minardi. You'll see Minardi killed off by some of the bigger teams. I believe that McLaren seem to have been the one that's leading this. Ron Dennis says it's not personal. I'm afraid it is personal to me, because at the end of the day, they won't be successful in arbitration, but it'll cost me between $1 and $2 million that I clearly do not have to fight a case that I believe has already been fought. And whatever the outcome, it's not good for the sport. If we go down, there'll be 9 teams, then there'll be 8. You know, what do these teams want? To only race against each other? Maybe.
That's why they call it the Piranha Club. Well, Tony, the bosses can't agree, so what chances of these changes being implemented?
I think there's a chance for some of them being implemented, because there's some very, very good ones indeed. The one that I love is standardised components, for example, standardised electronic box that controls everything. There you go, you have to use this, which will reduce the gizmos. The 2 days of qualifying, I think, is excellent, really good value. The aerodynamics, etc. But I agree with David Coulthard, you can't have the driver swap, I'm afraid, because there's too much money at stake, too many contracts, engine manufacturers and so on. That is not realistic.
But the big teams, like Ron Dennis saying, they're saying, leave us alone, we will sort it out. It doesn't need to change. What do you say to that?
As I've said before on our programme, that's the insiders looking in, protecting their investment. You have to have a separate person, as Eddie Jordan says, a visionary outside, being objective and saying, sorry, for the long-term good of the sport, you have to make these changes. And these changes will also affect economics as well.
The meeting of the team bosses, by the way, October the 29th. Right, let's join Martin Blunder now for a lap around Suzuka, second only in the popularity stakes among the drivers to Spa. They really like the place, in particular Michael Schumacher, 4 times a winner and on pole for the last 4 years.
Suzuka, one of the finest racetracks anywhere in the world, and not just in Formula One. Already the pit straight feels good. It's downhill, often tailwind, and your car builds speed so easily to well over 190 miles an hour. I'm standing on the pit lane blend line, which is crucial here because the racing line is on the left-hand side at such high speed, and you have to stop the cars coming out of the pits immediately taking to that line because turn 1 is a deceleration zone in effect, and it's a big challenge to get the car under control and slowed down enough for the entry of 2. But prepare immediately for the crucial double S. The first a left-hander, 135, the right upon you immediately, 115, another left ahead. They've shaved the top of the crest, and now the cars arrive much more quickly to the foot of the hill. They've made some changes at Dunlop curve. They're still fine-tuning them, as you can see over there. It used to be a constant radius, 150 mile an hour, uphill left-hander, and it was very bumpy. Now they've moved it inboard a little bit to create some runoff area to make it much safer. Many drivers, including myself, have had a good bite out of that barrier, but with those changes, effectively now, it's 2 left-handers joined by a short straight. The quicker arrival speed into Dunlop and the tighter first left means they really do have to lift off the throttle, but still, at the end of this long left-hander, they're up to 170 miles an hour. Bring it down, just 2 gears into Degner 1, do not run wide. Degner 2 feels a bit clumsy, good grip on the exit, underneath the bridge. You'll be passing over there later on, but right now, concentrate on the hairpin. 160 down to just 40, snatching the brake on the way in, no problem though. Car seems to be stable on the exit. A long right-hander now, 170 miles an hour, easy in the drive, treacherous when there's some standing water. Get ready for spoon, 180, down 3 gears, 105, ride a little bit high, slow again to 90, now on the throttle hard, but you have to gauge the exit carefully. Finally, time to think. Watch Sato's right hand on the steering wheel, adjusting the car for the final part of the lap. So you've survived this far, but the best is yet to come. The 130R left-hander. I wonder if the cars will be good enough this year to take this corner absolutely full throttle. And that means over 190 miles an hour right where I'm standing. And look at the runoff to the outside, barely 20 metres and a little bit of gravel. Get it wrong here, and you'll have a good chance to sample some Japanese hospital sushi. Let's go on board and see what that looks like from a driver's eye view. Supremely fast, but very narrow. Bring it immediately to the left. Try and brake in a straight line to come down to just 40 miles an hour for the wicked curbs at the triangle. You have to ride those as well as you can. Try to find some traction on the way out. The hill beginning to help you already. Accelerate towards the start-finish line. What a great challenge, but there's no small accidents around here.
Big one for Jacques Villeneuve yesterday, coming out of Spoon close to 180 miles an hour. Confirmation he will be driving, though, for BAR next season. And Montoya also hooking a wheel over the curb, crashing into the barrier. The Colombian really shaken up as well. A big impact, that one. Let me just remind you how the standings look. Barrichello's second place now assured. The Brazilian looking for his 3rd successive victory. Montoya, Ralf Schumacher and Coulthard could all finish 3rd, but Coulthard emphatically the best of British once again. This is Jenson Button's last weekend with Renault. Next season he joins British American Racing. Meantime, in the constructors, the top 5 places look pretty clear-cut, but down the field a real squabble involving Jaguar, BAR and Jordan. Honda engines have a key role on home territory.
The battle for the remaining spoils of the season is intense. After a year of racing and 416 constructors' points already awarded, BAR and Jordan just need 2 to move up in the championship. To help them focus on that, the Japanese-powered teams have a secret weapon for today, the Suzuka Special Engine.
We're able to find some additional power for Suzuka. So that's a Suzuka Special. It's a step up from Indianapolis last Grand Prix, and we're here with a higher spec.
It's probably a 1/10 of a second, might even be a little bit more than that. We need all the tenths we can get really to try and sort of fend it off, because 2/10 of a second in the middle of the pack could be 6 to 10ths really, and it makes a massive difference when you go racing. You just can't pass around here, so you know, it's qualifying position is very important.
Honda had a weak start to the season and have had to do their development in public with some embarrassing results. They've since improved the power and drivability of their V10 by designing new engine internals while also raising the rev limit. Whether reliability follows remains to be seen this weekend.
The development stakes had increased dramatically, so Honda probably by their own admission in the early stages had a little bit to catch up, but they did that. and in the last 4 or 5 races their engine has made huge improvement, and the fact that we have yet another engine here for qualifying in particular, they're right there at the moment. They've made probably the biggest significant increase of any manufacturer throughout the season.
BAR are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at the quest for their 2 points. Chief designer Jeff Willis, here on the left, has abandoned his drawing office to oversee the team's technical operation. He's discovered how Ferrari optimised their tyres, but only one driver will benefit.
I felt we improved the car with some part of the car, but the part is for next year, and just Jacques using here and using the last Grand Prix. But I accept. I mean, I'm really happy the team working very well, and they find something for next year.
We have got an improvement which we found in testing recently, and it's purely around the amount of parts we've got to run it over this weekend. And unfortunately, and as much as we would love to have had enough for Olivier to run as well, it's not been possible, and so it's only on Jacques' car this weekend.
Last weekend for Olivier Panis then at BAR. Last weekend for Alan McNish as well at Toyota. In my opinion, Alan cruelly shown the door by that team. He's waiting now live to talk to Louise Goodman.
Alan, your car in pieces behind us. You're 19th on the timesheets this morning. Is that a sign of how your day's been going?
It was certainly this morning. We did one lap and we had to change the engine, which was rather unfortunate because you lose so much time. But the guys got it together in 45 minutes, quick engine change, and we were able to get out in the second part of this morning's session. But I think this afternoon is going to be quite different to what we saw this morning.
Is this a bittersweet weekend for you? Home Grand Prix for Toyota, but potentially your last race. Do you know what's happening next year yet?
I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but certainly it's a race that everybody in the team wants to go out well with because, as you said, it is a home Grand Prix for Toyota and we want to finish the season on a high.
Very quickly, predictions for this afternoon. Where are you going to finish?
Probably about 14th, somewhere about there, maybe a little bit higher.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
So, but isn't his last Grand Prix? It is our 100th Grand Prix, by the way, this weekend. And Tony, we've been picking out 1 or 2 of our favourite moments. And you start off with the 2 of us bobbing and weaving on that yacht in the harbour in Monaco in '97.
Das Boot it was. Great idea to broadcast from a boat, and everything was going wrong on the track. Williams forecasters were getting it wrong, and we had to deal with a big swell in the harbour.
To score a second place is absolutely phenomenal. Imagine what they're doing in Brazil now, apart from the cameras falling out.
Yeah, well, someone dived and saved that camera. Let's have a little word with Jackie Stewart now, shall we? He's won here. A bit of rain around for your next choice as well. Belgium 98, and all sorts of things went on there.
My favourite track, but we had everything, the drama, the crisis. Look at this, miracle of miracles, no one hurt, 13 cars severely damaged, and one of the biggest ever pile-ups in Formula 1. Then we had this incident, amazingly, after that. Michael Schumacher in the gloom there of the spray, hitting the back, and then going to try and hit David Coulthard, allegedly saying to him, "You tried to kill me." And then you just, when you thought it was all over, Jordan's breakthrough 1-2, Damon Hill winning. Absolutely fabulous for the British team and for Eddie Jordan. I loved that race.
Yeah, we love an underdog, don't we? And I must say, Minardi struggling, as we've heard from Paul Stoddart a bit earlier on. Their point-scoring performance at home for Paul Stoddart in Melbourne at the start of this year. Mark Webber crossing the line 5th, picking up those precious points. Such jubilation from Paul Stoddart. And at the end of it, he showed he was a pretty useful television professional as well. Paul, just turn the interviewer down there for us and ask him about the scrap with Salo at the end and his feelings, could you?
How did you feel when Salo came up behind you and we said at any cost, don't let him pass, and then you saw him spin in the background?
When you guys are saying, don't let him pass, I'm going, hang on, we won a point, but we were fighting it. So I was a bit of a wounded bull at that stage. Obviously, I have completely no...
Well, coming up, we got the best of Martin Brundle's grid walks. Before that, though, James Allen's choice, and he starts with the last race of our first season at Jerez.
There have been a lot of really memorable moments during ITV's 100 Grand Prix, but for me the biggest story was the championship showdown at Jerez in 1997. I remember it as a tense and incredibly dramatic weekend. In qualifying, 3 cars set identical fastest laps, which must be physically impossible, but it really happened that day.
And hi, Terrell Frenson! This is amazing! I cannot believe this! Hi, Terrell Frenson has done exactly the same time as Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher and stays therefore in 3rd place.
In the race, Jacques Villeneuve needed to finish ahead of Michael Schumacher to win the world title.
and he made his dramatic move for the lead after the second round of pit stops.
Villeneuve is all over him, look, he's going through. Oh, yes.
Oh, out goes Michael Schumacher.
That didn't work, Michael. You hit the wrong part of him, my friend. I don't think that will cause Villeneuve a problem.
But there was a sting in the tail as well. I was in the pits and spotted that Williams and McLaren were collaborating tactically against Ferrari. The payback was that Villeneuve let Mika Häkkinen through to win his first ever Grand Prix. Jacques Villeneuve won the world title, and Michael Schumacher was disqualified from the championship by the FIA. For me, the two best drivers we've seen on ITV in the last 6 years are Mika Häkkinen and Michael Schumacher, and therefore if I had to pick a favourite race, it would be right here at Suzuka 2 years ago. Winner take all for the World Championship. Both drivers were flat out the whole race. I've never seen either of them push so hard. Every lap seemed like a qualifying lap. Schumacher won, and afterwards both drivers told me this was the toughest and best race they'd ever had.
We've had very good races in the past, but I mean here and then it's for the championship. I guess we haven't had any harder races in our championship career.
I was trying to concentrate all the time for the racing itself and went flat out. We had to be fair, and it's unfair if I start spoiling his victory now and start saying something negative and not to be happy about it. I think this is fun, you know. Let's remember this is sport, and next time it's my turn to maybe win.
They really respected each other, those two, and that day was their greatest race. We've travelled over 600,000 miles to bring you the Grand Prix and broadcast almost 700 hours, and I have loved every single second of it.
Do you want to know what it's like at the front of the grid? Let's find out with Martin Brunk.
In the blue corner, you've got Goldilocks. In the red corner, you've got Golden Gonads himself. Now that I've gone, who's your favourite driver in Formula 1?
Well, I was hoping you were going to make a comeback.
We're going up the first corner, as for the takeoff, whatever they call it here.
It's called the start. We had 120,000 people. Don't worry, John, we'll cut that bit out of the programme. You did tell me it's going to be your right-hand side. What's special about it? That one didn't get hit quite as many times? Yeah. Okay. He's my minder today because thank you very much. Thank you, Ron. My tip at the moment is the piano sitting here at the front of the grid. I've never seen that before. Brian, glad I caught up with you. Had to run to you. I reckon even you couldn't get 22 into one into that first corner. Montoya doesn't want to talk to I gave him a... Thank you very much, Karl-Heinz. Congratulations on your first Formula 1 pole. How's it feeling?
Pues Martin, estoy muy contento. Yo creo que las cosas se dieron muy bien y pues no sé. What do you think of that?
Sí, says muy bien. He's a big guy. It's unbelievable. I'm dying to get a shot of you and him standing side by side. Look, that's got to be the shot. Naomi, is it possible to have a word, Mr. Puff Daddy? How are you?
As soon as the race starts, I'm gonna light it up.
So you're just going to chew on it. Are you nervous or something?
No, I'm never nervous. Are you nervous?
How am I going to get in here? I want to have a word with His Majesty. So, how are you? Have you got a quick word for us on British television?
Yeah, but this time I have no the luck that you take me around your track.
There's a man here I've never ever seen on the grid. In 18 years, I've never seen this old codger on the grid. Well, we missed you. And back to you in the studio.
We've got a competition involving that old codger coming up for you in a couple of minutes' time. But Ralf Schumacher started exactly the same time as us, Melbourne 97. He's also approaching his 100th race. But the tension between the German and his Williams teammate Juan Pablo Montoya is still very apparent.
Williams BMW side by side down into turn one at 210 miles an hour. Who is going to be the last of the late breakers? And he's lost his wing. They've touched. Ralf Schumacher loses his rear wing.
It's motor racing's big no-no. The Williams team watched in despair as their two drivers collided on lap 2 of the US Grand Prix, putting Ralf Schumacher into the pits for lengthy repairs to his rear wing, and instead of a place on the podium, condemning Juan Pablo Montoya to a depressing 4th place. So much more was possible.
It's very disappointing, really. It's, you know, we're trying to beat everybody else, and we just, you know, it's not the first time he does it. And if we keep doing that, it's never going to happen.
It's obviously completely unacceptable, and obviously we'll be thinking about how we deal with it, but ultimately the drivers are driving the car, but you know, it's completely unacceptable to hit each other where they're in the same team.
Since we are not 15 anymore, I think we realize that by ourselves, but certainly Frank and Patrick weren't happy with the situation and told us that they wouldn't like to have that happen again.
It's not the first time these two have compromised each other's Sunday afternoons. Remember just a fortnight before Indianapolis at the Italian Grand Prix. But as long as they race for Williams, they'll be free to race each other. The alternative is to run a system like Ferrari, where the drivers compete for the team, not against their teammate.
If you're going to operate like that, you probably need a number one in the team, I think. If you got two equal drivers, you know, why am I going to have to step back for him?
Well, it's a bit difficult for Juan and myself because both of us, I think, are very similar. And since we both try to win races, it's not a clear number one and number two. Maybe one day when we find ourselves in different teams, it might be easier.
Until then, they'll have to avoid each other and the rest of the field. The only benefit of all these prangs is that the Williams boys have made their mistakes while Ferrari have been dominant. They'll have to be on their best behaviour if they're to beat the Scarlet Cars in 2003.
Ralph second, just 0.2 of a second behind Michael in practice, Montoya fourth. But that's what happens, Tony, I guess, when you race against each other in one team. Williams do it, Ferrari don't.
Yeah, but McLaren do it as well as Williams. And why? Because they're run by racers. Now, Ferrari's attitude, I find, is abhorrent, and that comes from Jean Todt, who said they won't race each other, but they have a responsibility to the sport, and the sport is called motor racing. You race each other, then you get excitement, then you get the skill of the drivers, and long may it continue at Williams and at McLaren.
Of course, it is BMW power in that Williams, and the man responsible for it, Gerhard Berger, or one of those, I should say. There he is, familiar figure with Louise.
Gerhard, it's looking pretty close amongst the front runners. Ferrari seem to be away and ahead, but your guys in McLaren, is it going to be a very tight battle?
Usual picture, Ferrari very strong behind Mercedes and us fighting for the second row. I would say maybe a very little chance to get one car into the first row, but otherwise big fight with McLaren Mercedes for the second row.
Have you turned opened the revs up to max for this afternoon?
So of course, we did.
What's going to make the difference?
Well, I think Suzuka, for me, is the best circuit in the moment in the whole world. I think it's a real driver circuit. I think a driver can make here a difference. And we have a good balanced car. We have the right engine in the car. So I think let's see what we can get out of it.
Thanks, Gerhard.
18,500 revs now, the max in that Williams. Well, now that competition I told you about, it has a distinct Murray Walker theme to the question and to the answer as well. 10 prizes, signed copies of Murray Walker's autobiography, unless I'm very much mistaken, and 10 signed DVDs of Murray's F1 heroes. Here's the question: which world champion gave Murray a lump in his throat at Suzuka in 1996? Was it A, Jacques Villeneuve, B, Damon Hill, or C, Mika Hakkinen? A, Jacques Villeneuve, B, Damon Hill, C, Mika Hakkinen. You can enter via the ITV F1 website or get on the phone. Dial 09069 51 50 50. 09069 51 50 50. Calls will cost you 60 pence a minute. Shouldn't take any longer than that. Lines close midday, Friday, October the 18th. By the way, that side is open for business throughout the winter break, and Eddie Jordan, the next high-profile guest in the chat zone, Wednesday lunchtime. It is very pleasant over there in Suzuka, the old fairground there. Don't forget that figure-of-8 circuit, the only figure-of-8 circuit on the calendar. Very pleasant, 21 degrees, terrific enthusiasm from the fans as well. Next, the last qualifying session of the year.